Welcome to the Rivercity Unlimited podcast by powerlifting coaches with infinite solutions for your problems. A good coach is ubiquitous now in powerlifting and strength training, but that hasn't always been the case. In 2017, Rivercity founder trained in a well-known powerlifting gym in North Brisbane, Australia. Dealing with outdated coaching services with a need for more community or support, he sought out a new coach with a better system and support. He soon realized that there were fewer coaches in powerlifting to meet the demands of beginner to high-level competitive powerlifters. After spending months studying, designing, trialing and testing systems, Rivercity Barbell and its first coaching system were born. Created from a single powerlifter experience with an intention to improve the athlete experience, the unique system meant athletes could reach maximum strength injury-free. 6 years on, and Rivercity Barbell system is still relied on by elite and amateur athletes. Please welcome your hosts, Matt Burton and Diana Stubner.
Alrighty, so episode 3, this is going to be the story about Zoe. So Zoe is our current nutritionist and sports dietitian at Rivercity Barbell. She's been with us now for...
I think it's like almost 2 years.
Yeah, it's coming. It doesn't... I didn't realise it was that long, eh?
Yeah, I thought about it the other day and I was like, shit, it's been a while.
Yeah, it's been good. It's been good having someone doing that side of things. I remember when I first established Rivercity Barbell, I was like, one thing I never wanted to do was nutrition. I'm like, I really don't like nutrition, and I know how much like people have problems with nutrition, and I think you've got to be a very understanding and empathetic person, and sometimes I'm not very empathetic.
Never would have noticed that.
I am empathetic to people, and I understand things, but when people keep continuously do the same thing over and over, which you would see a lot of in nutrition. And sometimes I think it doesn't come down to the fact that people don't want to do it. It's just they get lazy.
Yeah, there's so many compounding factors that come into nutrition. I think that's what makes it so complex. And even obviously some of the stuff that I'll talk about today, like just even that starts to like scratch the surface. Like I'm not someone that's had like an overly complicated history, but still it's affected like my nutrition and how I've handled that in so many different ways as well. So,
but I also think too, like as a nutritionist, it's hard to tell someone to do something because it's so easy to access like food nowadays. Like if you think when we were younger, like you had to. I'd be like, oh, I feel like pizza, but I'm not going to get it because I'm too lazy to go get it.
Yeah.
But now you just go on an app and you're like, boom, it's at your doorstep in like 15 to 30 minutes.
Yeah, 100%. Like the ease of getting pretty much anything, and like that could be obviously things that are either on your plan or off your plan as well. Like it's just so much easier to essentially like eat unnutritious foods and have that easy access to it. So yeah, like those barriers that were there beforehand aren't really there as much. But I also just sort of encourage that like, well, that also means that there's increased access to still healthy options. We just need to be able to be in the right mindset to be able to choose those as well.
Yeah, and I think people are it's very hard for them to select healthy options because it's so easy to access like non-healthy options. And I think like a lot of that has to do with like today's society and the problems you see as well, like in health-wise, not only over people like putting on weight, but also like health conditions and stuff that like gut issues, which you would see as well a lot of.
Oh yeah, 100%. Like so much things, and this is the crazy thing about nutrition is that like so much of it can be preventable, but like it's not just because of how we choose with our behaviors. But that's why I find so fascinating about nutrition is like it can affect literally so many aspects of like your physical, your mental health, like everything in so many different ways. And I think this is why like when I did start studying it, I was like, this is like the coolest thing ever because it can have so many different effects on you, from your chronic health to your performance, just how do you feel in your daily sort of like life by making some of these changes. And a lot of the time they don't need to be huge changes or huge tweaks. It's like just those small little things, but they can make a massive difference to how you feel on a day-to-day basis. I
think one of the biggest things that I heard years ago that really blew my mind was the fact that like when you eat vegetables, they can actually make you leaner. And I was like, whoa, what the fuck? Like, I love vegetables, you know me, I'm the
Yeah.
salad guy. But like the fact that I'm like, why am I not shredded yet? All I ever do is eat fucking salad. But like the fact that all the micronutrients that are in your vegetables and that help you actually like get leaner. And you know, I've known people that don't eat them, and then they go and eat it, and next minute they got like veins and whatever, and they're like, what the hell? It's like, maybe you should have been eating vegetables a long time ago.
Who would have thought that that would be the key to things? But yeah, you're 100% right. Like, I mean, you think about like the general recommendations. No, people like shit on like the dietary recommendations all the time, but I'm like, well, like I think it's like 2% of people or something like that of people are actually like eating 5 serves of veggies a day. Like people just don't do it, and then they're like, oh, like the dietary guidelines are shit. Like they don't do anything. It's like, well, like maybe if you actually followed them, you would maybe get like a bit of an idea that you would get closer. But veggies, yeah, like people miss sort of the understanding. It's not meant to just be like a filler food. Like you're not just having it to fill you up because you can't eat as much of like other foods, but like if you are actually getting like more quantity but also like diversity in terms of the quality of the micronutrients that you're getting, your body gets access to all those vitamins and minerals that it actually needs across the day rather than only just a select few or a smaller amount of those select few. And then if your body is essentially, I always call it like the better quality fuel, like your body is getting like all of the fuel that it needs to do everything optimally. When it does that, your body is going to perform optimally, which then means that you can actually have increased energy expenditure. And this is where I find like the leanness sort of happens, is that like people will eat the same amount of calories, but because they're now having all these other nutrients, their body can work faster, it can work more optimally, more efficiently, you burn more energy, and then suddenly, yeah, you start dropping body fat and like, well, I didn't change anything else. It's like, yeah, but your body is working better now.
But then it's like people are always like, I'm tired, I'm fatigued, I feel like shit. And what do? They go straight to caffeine, sugar.
The Band-Aids.
Yeah, like the things that give you like limited like hits instead of just refueling themselves properly. So like if they actually had caffeine, that'll give them a hit, but they got like the gas in the tank to continue going. And that's the thing I think people don't realize. They'll get into their sessions, so like their pre-workouts, all that shit they take. There was a stage there a while ago that I refused to take pre-workout, and it was probably for about 12 months. And it wasn't because I didn't like the fact that what pre-workout did to me. Me being someone that stimulants don't really do that much, it really makes me like kind of sweat a little bit, feel like I'm working a bit harder. But I started to realize that like it was affecting my sleep at night because of too much caffeine. And the second one was I would like use it as like you said, a Band-Aid when I didn't eat properly. So I knew if I stopped using caffeine that I would eat properly because I knew that I wouldn't get through my session. So it kind of like I reversed the thing on myself so that I could train myself to eat properly before I actually trained, and I'd get more out of my sessions because I didn't have something to rely on.
100%. And like this came across, I was speaking to a new client this week, and like to be honest, anyone in this situation, if they're consuming like 4 or 5 plus coffees a day, I'm like, that's not even the worst of it. I've definitely seen way more than that. But it's like, hey, like you don't have an energy problem. Like something's going on with your food here, because if you're needing that much to get you through the day, then you're missing out on something in your food.
I just don't understand how people can consume 5 coffees a day. Like, I don't know if you have a special taste palate.
Yeah, like they generally enjoy it.
But like, I just don't like the taste of coffee on the best of days. And I drink mocha, but I don't dislike coffee, but I drink like 1 coffee in the morning. And sometimes when I'm tired in the afternoon, I'll be like, oh, I'll just have a little one for a pick-me-up. But I'm not one to think like, oh, fuck, I'm going to go have another coffee. It's like 11 o'clock. I'm like, give me food.
Becomes like an addiction, honestly. Like I ask people, I'm like, hey, like what would happen if you were having less of this? Like, do you think you'd be more tired? Some people say like, yeah, no, I need it to run. And other people are like, it's probably just like a habit. Like I enjoy it, so I just have it heaps. And they kind of see it as a thing that's like not really super high calorie, but then it also depends what they're putting in it. Like I have so many people ask me like, oh, is it bad to have, full cream milk in your coffee and all these sorts of things? I'm like, well, okay, like 1, what is your goal first? But then also 2, like how much are you having it? But then how many coffees a day are you having? Like if you're having like a dash or something, I'm like, it's not going to make a difference. I don't really care. But if you're then doing that 7 times a day, it's like, it's going to start making a difference.
Well, if you start to drink like 100 mils of milk in every coffee 5 times, that's 500 mils of milk.
100%.
And I'll use this as an example. Like my previous partner's mum used to live with us for a while, and her mum used to drink like up to 10 coffees a day. And you'd be like, oh, do you want lunch? We're making lunch. And she'd be like, oh, I'm not hungry.
Yep.
I'd be like, all she would do was drink and coffee all day. And she's like, oh, I don't need to eat much. Like, I need to lose weight or something. And she would literally, like, her go-to food would be cheese on toast. And I was just like, that is so unhealthy.
Yeah, and as you can see, like, people are then replacing meals with coffee because they're like, oh, it sustains my energy and stuff. But also, like, the thing that I hate so much about, I'm not a coffee drinker, I'll preface it by saying that as well, but no hate. But, like, you know, like, caffeine, it doesn't provide our body with energy, it more, like, blocks the fatigue. And this is why so much, even when it comes to, like, training and everything, I'm like the thing that you need to make sure you have down pat first is actually getting the energy and getting the carbohydrates, because caffeine will have that performance-enhancing effect, but it happens from the fatigue blocking aspect. It doesn't give your body the energy. And if you're just blocking it, then at some point that fatigue will still catch up to your body if you're not replacing the right kind of nutrition as well.
So, like, I like to put that as a crash.
Yeah.
So, like, you'll see people who are tradies and they'll come to the gym and they'll smash, like, 2 scoops of pre-workout and they'll get halfway through their, like, training and then they'll just go boom and hit a wall. And, like, it's like, you see it straight away, like, oh, you're not eating right properly for sure. But then if someone is fueling right and they take caffeine, the caffeine just gives you that little bit of a oomph to like train harder.
Exactly, and that's what I mean. Like, when you're using it in a performance aspect, it's like, yeah, make sure your nutrition's on point, make sure you're doing your proper pre-training, like food in terms of those carbohydrates as well, and then you can add on that caffeine as that extra little thing. Like, as with any supplement, like, it's always going to be that, like, tiny, 1 to 2% sort of difference that it can make on that, but it can enhance that. But if you're only relying on that, then you're shooting yourself in the foot anyway.
Yeah.
Because you're missing the other big amount of percentage that you could have been getting that's beneficial from food.
Yeah, 100%. I fully agree with that. So let's dive deep into your story and like what we're here for. So we want to introduce Zoe as who she is, where she came from, what made her so passionate about like nutrition, and so everyone can get to know her on a like more of a deeper level. So go back to the like where you were as a child and what you've done, whether it's sport wise or what.
Yeah, I think kind of what I was alluding to beforehand, like I had to think about this before we sort of jumped on the podcast, and I was like, I think there's probably 2 kind of like main things that definitely influenced a lot around like how I am with food, and especially like the way that I sort of practice at the moment now, and they've kind of like worked hand in hand. But it does probably start on like quite early on for me. So when I was quite young, like I used to be really quite sick, and it took actually quite a while for people to figure out what was going on. So basically when I mean young, like this is like when I was like 2 years old. So I was like in and out of hospital, no one could kind of figure out what was going on. Doctors were like trying to guess diagnose different sorts of things. So it was a whole time for my mum, so appreciate her for sticking out with it. But then by the time that I was 3, they finally were able to actually find a doctor that could diagnose me. And essentially what they sort of came to the conclusion of was that I had a autoimmune gastrointestinal disease, and that's called ulcerative colitis. So to kind of give you an idea of like what this actually sort of means, like most people have heard of like autoimmune diseases, like there's a fair few of different ones, things like lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, all this sort of stuff. And obviously with these, what happens is that like our immune system is supposed to attack like foreign things that come into our body, like any kind of infections, any of this sort of thing. But what happens with autoimmune diseases, it essentially sees our own body as this foreign thing. So it sees it's something in our own body as bad, and it starts to attack our own body, even though there's nothing actually there. So with that sort of starts to happen, and you get like lots of inflammation, all this sort of thing. So that's part of what sort of happens on in my body. And then in particular for me, it occurs a lot in terms of my my gut, and particularly like my large intestine. So ulcerative colitis, not many people have actually heard of this a lot. More people probably have heard of like Crohn's beforehand, and they're kind of part of the same family. So they're both part of like the inflammatory bowel disease family. Crohn's is kind of often referred to being as like a bit more severe, but a really big differentiating factor is just where this like inflammation or where the disease is actually occurring in your gastrointestinal tract. So what generally happens is that because our body is attacking itself, it forms like these like essentially like sores or ulcers on the inside of our intestines. So for me, it's the intestine. So it's like the large bowel.
Ouch.
Yeah, not very fun. So you can see how like that could make people like really quite sick. So in Crohn's, that can happen pretty much anywhere across your entire digestive tract, like basically from your mouth right the way through like to the bottom of your intestines. For myself, when it's classified as ulcerative colitis is when it's kind of only found in the large intestine or the large bowel.
Is it similar to irritable bowel syndrome, or?
So IBS is different. So like that's your irritable bowel syndrome. So that's more of like, I guess when people find that like they're not tolerating foods, you kind of get similar like stomach symptoms. So you get the bloating, you get whether people get like wind and that sort of thing, or the pain and all those sorts of things. But IBS is much more of just how food is digesting in your body, and maybe your nerves not being more sensitive to how things are digesting.
Is it still an immune disorder, or is it?
So no, IBS isn't an immune disorder. It's literally just like, hey, some people have more sensitive stomachs and don't digest certain foods as well, and might sort of notice that if they have very sensitive nerves, they get more symptoms in terms of that.
Because the reason I asked this is because my father has IBS. But
Yes.
Is IBS something that can be brought on by bad food choices, or?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah. Because that's why my dad had a big drinking habit and whatnot. So
yeah, absolutely. If you're doing damage to your gut over years and years, like 100%, it can then make, again, the nerves more sensitive to that sort of stuff as well. So yeah, so that's sort of like one part of it. The IBD, which is like the inflammatory bowel disease, is that there is like pathologically, inflammation and sores going on inside of the intestines, and then that can still lead to IBS symptoms. So someone like myself, I probably have both, one from the actual physical disease that was going on, and then two from that making my stomach or my intestines so, sore and inflamed over the years. I just get IBS as well. But the root cause for mine was basically having all of these sores and constant inflammation, which still goes on now. So this is like 25 years later.
Do you have medication and stuff that helps it? Or?
Yeah. So like as with pretty much any autoimmune disease, it's incurable. So like there's no way that they can actually sort of stop it. I'm on medication now. It's actually a higher dose of medication that I've ever sort of been on. Not ridiculously high. And the only other thing that you can kind of go on further than what I'm currently taking is things like steroids. But then that obviously has like a lot of other negative side effects. So they don't like people to take that sort of stuff as well. But so yeah, so essentially I was diagnosed with that when I was 3, probably from the age of like 3 to like 8 to 10. I was still quite sick. So I was still like in and out of hospital quite a lot of the time, going to all different sorts of doctors. My poor mum would try me on like literally anything. Like I saw like Chinese herbalists and shit, and like, like all different weird sort of supplements, and like my actual GP would always sort of tell her like, oh, there's not really any evidence around this and stuff, but like she was just kind of like desperate to do literally anything because I would get that sick. Like I would miss school at sort of periods and those sorts of things. And I didn't really sort of like have any other understanding of how life was supposed to be because it happened to me so young. Like I just understood that like I kind of felt shit most of the time. I was in and out of hospital a lot of the different times, and that sort of thing. So that was like a large sort of period in between there. By the time I was probably like 8 to 10, as I'm not exactly sure, but it was somewhere around that, things started to sort of settle down a little bit more. So I was probably
Do you think that the reason why it was so hectic when you were younger is because you were still growing? Or do you think that like the foods might have changed over the years, like that the quality of the foods might have increased?
So, like...
It's hard to say, really.
It is really hard to say. Also, because I was so young, I don't remember, like, I guess a lot of what was going on. Like, my mum, and I'm very privileged to this, like, my mum, like, definitely, like, raised me and my brother to be, like, really quite healthy. So, like, all the food, because I think of everything that was going on, she wanted to make sure that our food was always, like, really good quality. So, we never ate, like, heaps of processed sort of stuff or anything like that. And again, like, for the IBD disease, like whereas IBS is much more related to just the food, IBD can be brought on by anything. Like it can be even just exacerbated by stress. So if I physically get really, really stressed and anxious and anything like that, I will actually get more physical sick symptoms as well.
Zoe doesn't get anxiety
I've
at all.
never been stressed in my life, no. So yeah.
The Zoe I was talking to 2 weeks ago was like almost pulling her hair out, and I'm like, just chill, man. It's just a quiet time. You'll be right.
Life is stressful, guys. It's okay. But yeah, no, like literally I'd get stressed to the point of like being physically ill and that sort of thing and having to take time off of school and all that sort of stuff as well. So it wasn't great. But yeah, that's sort of like how it sort of ends up sort of happening. So it wasn't really a result of like what food I was eating. Sometimes it can just be like a random sort of thing. And the other thing that's really tricky with this kind of disease is it's actually not super common in young people. Like from what I have understood over the years is that majority of women tend to get it in like their 40s after they've had kids.
One thing that I've noticed too about immune diseases, so obviously one of my best friends, my coach as well, has just like in the last 2 years been diagnosed with diabetes, which is another immune disease. But I feel like a lot of the time it doesn't come out until people are like older. Like there's slow symptoms that kind of show themselves, but then they hit a certain age and then next minute like it goes like south.
Yeah.
Like really fast. So it's really crazy to think that like yours came out like when you were 2 years old.
Yeah, I've been told by a few people that, yeah, it's actually really quite uncommon to get it sort of that young. And that's, again, like there's no specific cause that they can sort of find, because they sometimes, you know, they suggest like, oh, it could be genetic. And I'm like, no one in my family has any kind of
immune disorder. No one like even backtracked, because like when I was talking to Will about all this, because I was really interested about it all, he was like, not my dad, but my dad's dad had like the arthritis.
Yep.
And so like it's most of the time it skips a generation, and then obviously if you have one immune disorder, it doesn't matter what it is, you could get any of like the bucket. It's like spin the wheel, you know, like.
I know. And this is actually a whole thing, because, you know, it became even something for me. I'm like, oh, you know, like if I have a kid, like they're more likely to kind of get this. And now like our running joke with Brandon, because obviously he has rheumatoid arthritis, we're like, Jesus, like
fucking setting your child up.
Our kids are in for it. I'm like, if they become out celiac, like I'm not giving up gluten. Like, I'm sorry. I've already been like, I'm not going to do that. But yeah, so like that was sort of like a large sort of part of my childhood. And then obviously because of that, like I still, even though my like physical disease was being managed better, I was still getting all of them now, like IBS sort of symptoms. Like I would get really bad like stomach distension. I would get really bad pain. I'd always feel like my stomach was just like uncomfortable. Even today, actually, like yesterday, I was like, oh, this is not feeling good. And it can just be sort of random. I haven't done literally anything differently, but things can sort of play up.
Is there certain foods that trigger it?
Definitely. Like onion, can't do large amounts of onion. Like I will be in stomach pain.
So what about acidic food? So like if you ate oranges and stuff like that.
Nah, those sorts of things. And this is where it's so individualized, each person. There's like so many common foods, and again, like your FODMAPs and these sorts of things, which you're more likely to react to. But for myself, the only things I ever noticed a huge difference was like large amounts of onion. I can actually tolerate it better now than what I did like a year or two ago. So there's like, cool. I never used to be able to have like any of it, no onion powder in anything. Like,
do you think if you exposed yourself a little bit more over time that your body will become immune to it?
Yeah, 100%. If you do like very small exposures, you build up your tolerance.
Because it's a funny thing, like going back to my childhood, my sister, her favourite food is eggs and like strawberries. But as a kid, she was allergic to both of them.
Yep.
But then as an adult, like she now can eat them and they're fine.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing with allergies, because you can grow out of them as kids. Like some people have heaps of allergies and then they'll kind of go away. I think it's a little bit different if you develop an allergy as an adult. I think it's less likely to kind of go away, but some stuff like that when you're kids. But no, when it comes to intolerances, like it's an intolerance point. So you can actually build up your tolerance to these sorts of foods. But if you keep eating like huge amounts, like you're going to feel shit.
You kind of just need to expose yourself.
You need to go for those like small amounts, like get to, you know, you may still notice symptoms from that, but if it's like a little bit of discomfort, then okay, well, can you still include that here and there to be able to build up your tolerance point? So like onion was definitely one for me. And then the other one is like legumes. Like I can eat like a packet of like roasted chickpeas, I'm good. If I eat a chickpea curry, the last time I did, I was in physical pain for like 24 hours. I remember being at work and I was like hunched over, like stabbing pain. It was terrible.
Crazy.
So like the extent that it can actually occur, and that was because it was just like a larger volume, and this was after I had done like the FODMAP sort of elimination diet. So I had taken all of these out of my diet and then sort of like reintroduced it back in, and then I just had a chickpea curry at one point because I was like, oh, like this should be fine, and then I was like, no, not fine.
Do you reckon that the chickpea would have inflamed it? And then the curries like hit it even more?
Oh, it wasn't like a hot curry or anything. Right. So I think it was just the amount of, and again, like legumes are a really common one to cause, like they ferment naturally more in your stomach. So if they're doing that, and then you're more intolerant to that as well, it's a lot of gas build up in your stomach, and that's where you get those sort of pains and everything come from as well.
Yeah, I won't deny it. Whenever I eat a soup with them in there, they make me gassy as fuck.
Like they're a very common food for that.
So they're actually really good for you too.
Yeah. I mean, like even like these days, if I make like a chili con carne, I'll put like red red kidney beans or black beans or something in that, and that's fine. I think it was really just like that huge volume in one sort of portion that sort of set me off that time, and I was like, probably won't do that again.
Yeah. Like, what about, like, so for example, if you went out and you ate a lot of fats or something, like say a greasy burger or anything like that, does that affect it in any way?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, for sure.
You know me, if we go to like Milky Lane or something, I'm like, what is the most plain burger that I can get? Because I don't know if it's just because I'm so aware of it now, but I can very much tell what makes my stomach feel good and what doesn't. I don't drink alcohol for this reason as well, because it instantly bloats me, and then I feel so uncomfortable, and I don't feel comfortable in what I'm wearing. Like, that's all I can think about, and I just don't enjoy myself anymore. So I'm like, what's the point of it for me? It just became, was like, there's too many negatives versus not really any positive that I was getting from it anyway. And same thing with soft drink. I find the exact same thing with that. I can barely get through a glass of soft drink, and that might take me like an hour or something as well, because just like the carbonation of it, anything really carbonated, bloats my stomach so instantly that I just feel super uncomfortable.
That would be like suicide. Like, my life would be over if you couldn't drink soft drink. Like, if someone woke up tomorrow and said, Matt, I'm sorry, but the rest of your life you can't drink soft drink, I'd be like, that's it. I'm going. I'm gone, guys. I'm out. Fucking soft drink is my life.
It's just become like, I definitely used to drink more soft drink, and again, it just got to a point where like no one told me I sort of shouldn't, but I was like, I don't like feeling like this, and that's how I am so much with a lot of the foods that I have these days. It's like, you know, like I'm not interested in buying takeaway. I'm not interested in getting greasy foods and these sorts of things. I will on the odd occasion, like I ate like half a pizza on the weekend, and I was like, this is delicious. But, you know, a lot of the time I won't do it really frequently because I just don't want to deal with feeling shit. Like, you get to a point and you're like, why?
But a seamlessly plugged there, just because you can't drink carbonated drinks, you should just drink 5 Active because they're not carbonated. But anyway.
Might work for you, but
yeah.
I'm still caffeine free, so
yeah. Do you not have caffeine at all?
No.
Does it affect your belly, or is it just because...
I never got into drinking coffee. I think I had pre-workout once when I was like 19 or something, and I was like buzzing off the gym floor, but I never bought it. I think I just borrowed it from like my brother or something like that. But I mean, like, I have actually been saying that like I probably will start to trial and use it specifically for like my gym training sessions, because I can sit there and gym training like yawn the entire time as well.
I'll give you I've got 5 cases in the garage. I'll give you some drinks to take home with you.
We'll try it out. But yeah, no. So essentially, like, I was, about sort of like 8 to 10 years old. I still had all these IBS sort of symptoms, but my actual disease was being managed a lot sort of better, and I was in this kind of remission sort of state. But at the same time, I think like when I started to get into like my early teen years, this is where I started to notice, I guess, the fact that like how I was bloating and how my stomach used to be distended. Like, I wasn't seeing other people experience that as much. And I think this is like when I started picking it up on a bit more, and I started being more conscious about like how my body was looking. And I'd be like, well, like, I'm not a big person. Like, I was a relatively slim kid, but I was like, I feel like my stomach is always so big all the time. Like, why is it so big? And then starting to kind of get into that mentality of, I was like, well, maybe I need to lose weight. Like, this is going to actually help me to get my stomach smaller. Because I was like, there's no other way that I can figure out how to make my stomach smaller and look like all these other people that I can kind of see.
When I'm thinking about this, like, I think there's a podcast you should listen to on my podcast. There was a girl that had a similar issue to you, and she created this pill for, like, she went and became a nutritionist or whatever, and then I don't think a nutritionist or something, and then she went and studied. So Laura had her on, I didn't have her on. And she spoke about this pill that she created that's all made from natural herbs and everything to bring down like the bloating and everything. So I don't know whether it would be helpful for you, but I just had a like hypothesis and thought about it. Then. So
that's so good.
I'll link you to it. But,
yeah.
So how did you find that affected you, like you say, your mental health as well as a teenager and growing up as a kid?
Well, basically from that point, like I probably didn't have like a huge aspect of like what my mental health was then, but I realize now when I reflect back on it, like this is where my relationship with food and like the whole dieting cycle and everything started to come from, because I was like, I have this huge stomach, I can't figure out what to do with it. You know, I'm like 13 at the time, you know, so like there shouldn't be really a lot that I should do it, but I had a mum that's like always made, you know, poor comments about her own weight and, you know, always been trying to lose weight and really, really struggled with that and had done all like the dieting sort of things and was still doing that. And then I also then had someone in my family that was proactively like basically like calling me fat and telling me that I was fat and all these sorts of things. And like that all of that kind of combined put me into this headspace of like, oh, well, like I need to be doing better. I need to be doing some kind of exercise. I need to be eating less. Like, what should I kind of do? And that, like, my entire sort of, teenage years then perpetuate into this dieting cycle of like, okay, like, what should I be doing? And, like, I need to eat less and, doing, weight loss shakes and all these sorts of things. And again, like, at this point, I wasn't a big person. Like, I have no idea what my weight was majority of my high school years. But, like, I'm not a relatively short person. I knew that, like, from when I got my license when I was 16, I was, like, 176 centimeters. And then the only time that I remember roughly what my weight was when I was in grade 12. So it was the very beginning of grade 12 when I had to go in for a procedure for my stomach. And I was 55 kilos at that point.
What do you weigh now?
So these days, more. Definitely not 55 kilos now. But yeah, and I was like,
I like how you skipped that.
Yeah. Not important for anyone these days. But yeah, like, I was the same height I was now, but like 55 kilos. And I'm like, this...
It's tiny because you are small. You're still small now.
Yeah, but like I was, as I said, like I was that, but I was being told that I was obese and fat and looked like a whale and all these sorts of things. I had this distended stomach that I had no idea how to manage. Like this was, then early sort of 2000s. So all you get is like all the stuff that goes into magazines about, celebrities losing weight in 30 days and how you're meant to be the skinniest. And like everyone was looking, basically kind of like anorexic thin, and that was the ideal. And that's what I felt like I had to sort of chase. And it was just...
Back in the day, like when, like you think of like all the old movie stars, like blonde hair, skinny, like, who can I think of? Like just even like all the chick out of Clueless and all that type of stuff. That's what like Hollywood was about back then. Like
100%.
So even with my mum's era back in the day, like it was all about skinny, being tiny. Whereas like now it's like about like having a big butt. Like, that.
It's much more about health these days. And I do love the shift that's been happening more these days because I think it is more positive. More people are interested. Like there's more people going to the gym and that sort of thing than ever than back in those sort of days. But yeah, I remember like the fact that, like my mum used to always want to like take me out and buy me clothes and stuff because like she thought I was really thin and she always, but like I literally would refuse to wear anything that showed any part of my stomach. Like I distinctly remember that. Like she would buy me clothes and even my friends would be like, oh, hey Zoe, like you have like these nice like shirts or like these dresses, like I've never seen you wear them. I'm like, yeah, no, like I physically wouldn't wear half my wardrobe because I would not be comfortable wearing it. I was like, I cannot wear anything that would show my stomach in my lifetime. I was like, I can't do it. And my mum would say like, oh no, but you look so beautiful. Like she was so proud of me and how I looked and everything. And I was like, I can't do it.
But do you think that back then, did you do any sport or anything?
So I did play different sports. So like in high school, one of the biggest sports I did was netball. I was never like an overly athletic kid. I mean, like I'm not super coordinated.
You're going to make a power lifter out of you eventually.
I was a musician in high school because I was that cool. Thank you very much.
What'd you play?
I played saxophone.
Oh, cool.
So I played saxophone.
So you were pretty much Lisa Simpson.
No, I played the two different other saxophones than what she plays. I make this very clear. So I played like the alto saxophone for probably the 8 years, and I played the baritone saxophone, which is pretty much like, I don't know, like this tall off the ground. So it's like the one bigger than the one that Lisa Simpson plays.
Did you have your own?
No, so I used the one from school, but like I used to like have to like lug it on the bus and that sort of thing. So I mean, there was a lot of weight training that was going on there, let's be honest.
No, I just mean because in the context, like obviously talking about your belly being bloated and that, does exercise help that go down?
At that stage, it didn't.
Yeah. Okay.
Like, whatever I was doing there. And like to this point, like when I was in high school, I was still relatively active. Like I would get up at 5 o'clock in the morning. I would either take my dogs for a walk or do a Pilates video because that's what I grew up knowing what exercise was because that's like what my mum used to do was all like, like the workout videos. So I'd do like that in the morning and then in the afternoon I'd come home and I'd walk my dogs again.
Is that a premonition of like a 80s chick in a pink
legit. That was like the old around, VHS. Yeah. Like then we moved on to DVDs and it was a little bit more sophisticated.
Making me feel old, man.
Hey, I still did them. Like it was one of those things. But yeah, like this is what I was doing in high school because I was like, I need to be fit. I need to be thinner. This is the only understanding that I have of kind of like how to do this. But at the same time, like when I think about it, my food, as much as I was raised to eat well because of all these sorts of things, like parts of my food was horrendous. Like I could, this is probably more moving into like my early uni years. I could eat a kilo of Nutella in a week. Like that wasn't difficult for me. like that was out of like stress and out of like emotional eating and all these sorts of things. Because again, like when you start doing the whole dieting cycle, you know, you're like, oh, I'm going to do it. I'm going to be really strict. And then you can never stick to whatever they sort of set out, you know, like the stupid diets that they sort of create, because you get hungry, you have life happening, you're stressed, and then you just like overeat on things. And that was a cycle. I would, you know, down, you know, the whole entire box of shapes or like biscuits. The fact that my mum literally used to hide jars of Nutella from me. Like she'd be like...
Sounds like us in this house. We used to hide it from Christian.
Yeah.
So Christian gets like the Nutella and I find it in his room, or what's the other one? The Biscoff.
Oh, yep.
I've caught him eating the Biscoff like a million times. I'm like, dude, stop it. Like, go eat something like properly.
Yeah. Like legit, if when we ran out of Nutella, my mum would refuse to buy it. I would eat like the you know, like the baking chocolate chips?
Yeah.
I would take them from the cupboard and eat them. Like, and like to the point where like I would keep the empty wrappers like in my bedside table, because otherwise she'd be able to see it in the bin. Like it was this full, you know, like, and you think about it and you're like, this is ridiculous. It's like food hiding, it's shame around food, all these sorts of things. And, you know, at the same time, like I still wasn't overweight at this point, but because I was like trying to eat little and then ended up always eating all these little other foods because my body was probably so hungry and so deprived of energy and all these sorts of things. And I just thought like, well, there's no other way of how you're meant to like feel good and sort of lose weight. Like I just couldn't figure it out.
Because obviously you thought your stomach was fat, not bloated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. And you know, like there was different points where like my weight like would fluctuate like small little bits, but no, like I've never been significantly overweight. And this is something like I actually never used to talk about this sort of side of my history as much, because I almost felt guilty from the fact of like I talk about sustainable weight loss all the time, but I've never been physically overweight. I think the highest my weight's ever been in my life is like 75 kilos. Like I've never been huge, but that doesn't change the fact that I've still like essentially gone through like the same experience as a lot of these people. I've gone through the same sort of eating issues, the same sort of change in my relationship with food, and had to figure out a way of how I can actually make that better. And I am actually really like thankful that these days I am in a much better position with that. But to be honest, like that's still probably only in like the last 18 months to 2 years.
It doesn't matter if you're 120 kilos or you're 80 kilos if you still suffer from the same thing of walking and looking in the mirror and you see a fat person. It's completely different, because like I feel like the pressure on society for girls is a lot different for males. Like, so for a girl, with all the stuff that's going on in society these days, like girls have like fake boobs, so they look perfect, and they have fake lips and all this. Everybody else that doesn't have that doesn't look perfect, because that is the perception of perfect, not my perception of perfect, but society's perfectionist perception of perfect. And then same as like social media, but back then it was like magazines and shows and movies. It's just flicked to like in front of your phone all the time now, so it's just doubled.
And the filters.
Yeah, and the filters, like make people look perfect, and then you meet them in person and you're like, you do not look like your photos.
And this was something I struggled with for so long, and actually because I would hate it. Like, you'd even just like recording something for work. I'd be like, I'd do it, and you're like, oh, like I look like shit. Like, I'll try and do it again. And you're doing this like 3 or 4 times because you're like, I don't like how I look, like just to take a selfie to write some text on it. And I was getting so frustrated with like, why are we getting so caught up with this? And something that I actually did, and I'm still actually quite proud of this, is probably almost 2 years ago, maybe now, at least sort of a year or sort of 18 months ago, I just said to myself, I'm like, I'm done with this. Like, I haven't used a filter on anything because I'm like, I refuse to be sucked into it. And I'm like, I'm a very like raw and authentic person anyway. I don't wear makeup. Like, I wear it maybe like a couple of times a year.
I've ever seen you with makeup on.
Like an odd time if I'm going to get like photos or something like that, I mean, like I'm horrendous at trying to put on makeup anyway, so it probably doesn't look like anything when I do. But like I look like how I am when I'm seeing all my clients. Like, I'm not going to try and pretend to look something different when I'm just posting on social media. Like, I am who I am. So I stopped doing the filters on everything, and it's actually so refreshing, and it's almost like a weight that's lifted off of you. I don't have to worry about what I look like when I post something on social media. If I do a quick video, I can just do it in one take, and I'm like done. I'm not sitting there obsessing about like, oh no, like how's my jaw looking and that,
It's
or like
funny.
my skin. And
It's funny because I like remember when I first started recording like a podcast and I first started recording like content for social media. If we go back like 3 years ago, and I was like, every video I'd watch back and I'd be like, oh fuck, I just people are gonna think I'm a retard. I'm stuttering my words or whatever. And now I just get on. I'm like, and then I just smack a video together and post it. I'm like, I don't care what everyone thinks. Like, because at the end of the day, the people who matter and watch your content, they don't give a shit what you look like. They want to know the shit that you know up in your brain.
Exactly. So, and people, I think they do connect with people that they see as real. Like if you are that perfect sort of person, it's almost like you're like, well, I can't be like them, or I can't have their schedule or whatever. So you're like, well, there's no sort of point. Where if you see like real people doing real things, you're like, oh, I'd actually connect with them more because I feel like they are on my level. Like they make mistakes, all these sorts of things. Whereas if you're always seen as this like kind of perfect person, I often like see them not as less, but you're like, man, like you kind of just know it's not real anyway. That's why I used to hate about like, oh, like I am terrible at like food photography and making my meals look nice. But I'm like, also, all those like beautiful salad bowls that I used to see on like social media and all these sorts of things, I'm like, who actually makes their food like that? Like who has it like segmented into all different little sort of spots? And I'm like, no, you like just mix up your food and you eat it.
Man, my salad bowl looks like someone's come in with a hurricane.
Yeah.
And so I can just chop it all up, fucking throw it in, and whatever my fork hits goes in my mouth. Like, I don't give a fuck what it looks like.
That's it. And I got so annoyed at like food having to look so pretty to be healthy.
Yeah.
Because like that's, again, like I would have to be able to do that for work. And I'm like, my food just doesn't look pretty, hey. But I'm like, it's super yum and it's super nutritious.
It's a bit different if you like making it look good for like a ebook or something that you're cutting up or whatever, and trying to make something that look like good for the photos. But like, man, if you're posting something on socials, like you can tell, like, the other night I cooked corned beef and I just cut a piece off and I was like, dropped it in our group chat. I'm like, yeah. I'm like, and everyone was like, oh, that looks so good. I'm like, all I did was cut a piece off it and like take a photo. But
this is it. And like, this is, I guess, like moving towards like when I actually started to like be a dietitian and, you know, seeing some more clients, the biggest thing that I realized is that like people feel like they had to do everything perfectly to lose weight or to be healthy. And it's that kind of perception of like, oh no, it needs to look absolutely perfect. Like it needs to have the exact sort of perfect macros. It's that sort of like black and white thinking that again got people stuck and not actually making any kind of movement as well. And this is why like even when I do create, like not that I create loads of recipes because like I'm not a chef, like come on. I'm a very simple cook as well. So I'm like a packet sauce mix person. I'm like, I'm not this Jamie Oliver kind of person. I'm like, things need to be simple. Like a majority of people that are struggling with whether it's weight loss or just improving their nutrition in general, like they struggle with it because they feel like they have a lack of time. They don't have all of the ingredients in the world and stuff. Like they need things to be simple. They need things to be like easily accessible and just, simple to actually implement. And when all these things like look absolutely perfect, they're just like, well, how is my food ever going to look like that? And they feel defeated because they like, that feels like an absolutely unattainable goal to be able to achieve as well.
Well, kind of an easier way to say that is too like, me, I have ADHD. Anything that's overcomplicated, I won't do. So the other day I was like, literally, it's funny as I had a dream about corned beef. And I woke up and I'm like, I've never cooked corned beef before. I want to cook it. Yeah. Typed into Google, the simplest recipe for like corned beef. Come up with 4 ingredients in the slow cooker. Done.
Yeah.
So simple. Chucked it in on Monday morning at like, I think it was like 8 o'clock on 10 o'clock in the morning. We went to shops. Slapped it on for 8 hours, come back, it was ready. And then just cooked up some like veggies and like stuff and we had food for like 3 days.
Yeah.
And I'm like, if it was any more complicated than 4 ingredients, it would have been just in the too hard basket.
Yeah, and that's it. And I used to hate that about some recipes. It's like, you know, like there's 10 million ingredients and half of them you couldn't even get like at a grocery store and this sort of thing. It's like, how are people meant to do this? Like that's not what health needs to be. Actually, one of the worst things that I had ever seen, I don't think many people actually sort of follow this, but it'd be like the stuff that like Gwyneth Paltrow used to put out. I don't know if you ever heard about this, but she would create these ridiculous recipes and all these sorts of things of like the wildest ingredients, but they're like, oh, this is optimal health. It was also like very disordered eating and still is from what I understand. Yeah. Because like, again, it's like severe sort of restriction when they talk about what she's actually sort of like recommending. But yeah, it's just like something that's absolutely unattainable, and yet they say like, oh, this is the optimal for health, which one, it's not, but it makes people feel like, oh, well, there's no point in sort of doing anything because I'm never going to be able to actually achieve that as well. And that's something that I spend so much time now trying to sort of break down, is that like healthy nutrition or sort of being healthy, it doesn't have to be something that's huge. Even if your goal is actually quite far away from where you are now, you don't need to sort of set yourself up in terms of failure and be like, oh, if I don't hit all of these things right at once, then I'm a failure and I'm not going to get any progress.
But my question there is, what's optimal? Is optimal something that your opinion of like, you know, this is optimal because this is what I have the energy to do, or is something in the middle line of that optimal for you because you find that more easier to do, yet you're getting enough to function day to day?
Absolutely. And like exactly what you sort of said there is that like I say this to so many people, you can have the best plan, but if you're never ever going to be able to execute on that, it's not the best plan for you. You need to find, even if it is like a downgraded version of that, if that still puts you ahead of where you are now, that's going to be better.
Then like in 6-12 months time, when that point gets a bit easier, then you can upgrade that to a little bit further.
Absolutely. I think I talked about this on my social media this week as well, because I had a new client and like she's not doing any exercise at the moment. And we're like, okay, like what is your ideal that you want to do? And she sort of said that. And they're like, okay, well, what can you do right now? And she's like, well, I can walk twice a week. I'm like, perfect. And she's like, oh, I thought that like, you know, be like, I have to do exactly this. I'm like, no, I'm like, all I need to do is do that little bit more than what you're doing now. Once you hit that, then we reassess and we keep sort of adding on, working towards what your goal is. But if you set that absolutely unattainable goal, you're just not going to hit it. Then you're going to feel shit. It's the weight loss thing again. It's like we set that really restrictive diet. We never do it. We feel shit about it. So then we eat more shit food because we're trying to comfort eat ourselves. And then we feel worse than when we even started.
Yeah. I get that with training as well. Like same thing. Like a lot of people be like, oh, I can't get there like because I've got kids, and then I'm like, well, can you find a gym that has a creche? And they're like, oh, yeah, I can. And then they'll be like, all right, I've just got to book in the creche, but it gets too booked out. Well, why don't you book a week in advance? I'm like, and then you can plan your weeks out. And they're like, oh, yeah. It's like, how can you not think about that? Like, sometimes people just need you to give them the answers, and that's as simple as that.
And if we're very used to coming up with the barriers or coming up with the excuses, we'll always like keep sort of finding that sort of next thing as well. Like that there can always be a barrier. But as you said, it's around like, okay, well, they're going to be there, but how can you work around that in the best way?
An example I'll use this is Nat, obviously, as well. Both of us work with her. Today I had her check-in, and she's been struggling to get her sleep in. She gets her training in 3 days a week. And she's missed the 4th day the last 2 weeks, and then obviously her nutrition hasn't been the best. So I gave her recommendations for an ADHD app. She obviously has ADHD, and just said, look, go in there and just plan out your day and put a reminder in for everything from the second you wake up. And like I use it on my phone, and sometimes like if I don't have that there, I won't eat, and I'll be like, oh shit, it's 3 o'clock, I need to eat now. And my stomach will be like starving, and I'll have to go stuff myself full of food. Yeah. And then it ruins my day of eating.
Yeah, 100%. And as you said, it's all about the systems that we have in place. Like, we're not supposed to be able to handle everything by ourselves all the time. That's okay. But we sometimes just need to then have that support system of like, all right, if I need the reminders, if I need these sort of little things to help me until I can feel like managing that better, or you just keep using the systems. Like, that's okay. If that's what gets you the results, then use it.
Yeah. So back to where you were.
Yes.
So what made you go to uni?
I mean, I was kind of told that I had to.
Yeah.
I actually wanted to be a vet originally.
Okay. And then you realised how much shit the money is.
No, I just didn't think I was smart enough. Okay. So I actually, when I was
What'd you get at your HSC?
Okay, well, wait, hold up.
Yeah.
So back when I was like, I didn't think I was going to be smart enough. So I actually applied to do like a animal studies TAFE thing, like the thing that everyone does, because basic person.
I'm actually qualified vet assistant, you know.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I studied it. So before I became a coach, I studied, I'll get off this quick, but I was like, I need to get a new job. I'm sick of being a sign writer, and I was about year 8 in. Yeah. And I studied it online. Yeah, did my like placement, and then I realised how much money you get paid now, and I was like, nah, I'm not doing it.
Yeah, well, I wanted to do that, and I like full on applied for all of that, submitted all like my like class subjects, and then I remember like whoever was like the head of subject selection or something, that like pulled me out of class one day, and they're like, so like you applied for a TAFE course, and I was like, yeah, and they're like, yeah, you're not doing that, and I was like, what do you mean? And they're like, well, your grades are too good to not go for like OP. So they and this was a thing from like my high school, is that they literally convince the people that didn't have good grades to not do OP, and then convince the people that did do good grades to not do TAFE stuff so that their scores would be better. So
that is the worst manipulation I've ever heard.
And this is of like 15-year-olds, right? Like telling me like, oh no, and they're like, no, like we'll put you in like all the top classes.
Fuck up someone's whole future fucking life for that.
I look back at it and I'm like, this is so bad.
Man, that's so fucked up.
But literally, that's what they did. They're like, no, we're changing all your things. We're putting you back into sort of like OP, and we're going to put you in all of the subjects that you need to get into.
What happens if you said no?
I don't know. Just,
Man, fucking.
I mean, as a 15-year-old female, you're like, when there's like a guy like telling you like, this is what you're doing, you're like, okay. So essentially that's what ended up happening. And then after I ended up doing work experience at a vet, I was like, oh, maybe this isn't going to be for me. The amount of things, one of my favorites was when they just like gave me a bird and were like, can you just hold this while it dies? And I was like, yeah, okay. Because I wanted like, yeah, there was a bit too much death in like those 2 days or the week that I was there. I was like, oh, I don't know if this is for me anymore, to be honest. But anyway, like, so I kind of still was doing all those same sort of subjects and everything. And then it just got to the time of like you had to apply things, and I was like, oh, I want to do something that helps people. I always knew I wanted to do something that would like help people and like help to make people feel good. But I was like, there's no interest in becoming a nurse and any of this sort of thing. So to be honest, nutrition was actually something that I chose out of like like it'd be interesting to kind of learn a little bit more. I don't really know how it's going to go, but I was like, all right, well, I'll just do it because there's nothing else I'm interested in.
Also benefit yourself as well.
Yeah, I was like, it'd be nice to sort of know a little bit more about this sort of stuff and like how it impacts your gut and all these sorts of things. And as I said, like once I actually started the degree is when I was like, oh my God, like this is so freaking cool. Like just the amount of different ways that this can affect you. And something that I'm still really mad about is that they don't teach anything about nutrition to people in school, and especially around like.
Yeah, but the system, like me, like to just butt in there, and this is something that I've brought up. Me and D get in these really deep conversations, so that's why I'm really excited about this podcast.
Yeah.
Because we got in this conversation the other week and talking about the school system, and they literally teach at school to be stuck in a system, so that everybody comes out of that system and they don't want anybody going outside like a straight line. So they don't teach nutrition in there because they want you to just fucking do what they want you to do. So the standout people like yourself who choose to go and do things, they're trying to still direct you in that line so that the belt keeps rolling. You know?
Yeah.
Otherwise, in schools, they would teach so much more. Like, there'd be so many more courses. Like, why don't they teach business in...
Exactly.
Like, in school? Like
proper business.
Because they don't want everyone to own a fucking business.
No. But yeah, it makes me very mad because like I was even thinking about this morning. I was like, literally, like if they actually taught people how to understand like healthy food, what this looks like. Again, when people start going through body changes and all these sorts of things, they actually have the understanding of like what is actually, evidence-based or what's going to support them versus what is the shitty fad stuff. But they don't get taught any of that. So no wonder we all get, infiltrated by, I have no idea what I should be doing. So I'm just going to try and do whatever the mainstream is kind of telling me to do, which is generally always not the greatest. But yeah, so got into nutrition, ended up doing that. Was really, really lucky that I actually got a job straight into like private practice. I didn't really want to work in a hospital and that sort of thing regardless. And then where I was working was very, like I actually started working out in a gym. So I was working in the Good Life at Nunda, previously Go Health, back in the day.
You there for rent?
Oh no, I didn't have to pay it. So like the company that I was working with paid that for me.
Lucky.
So yeah, so I was working with an allied health company, but I was just placed in a gym. So I had like external sort of support systems, but it really exposed me to not only like obviously like general sort of like gym sort of populations, but I did start working with more active sort of populations, people in sports, and these sorts of things as well. And then again, like I saw then the continuation from, the teenage, the dieting sort of thing, the understanding of how much we should actually be giving our body, and then into like high energy demands of sport, and like being like, these people still have the same issues. They're worried about their weight, they're worried about their body composition, but they're now expending so much energy, but they're still consuming so little because they're so worried about how they're going to be perceived and what their body fat is and all these sorts of things, and they're massively underfueling themselves.
But the craziest part about it all is that people still think the less you eat, the more you're going to lose.
Yeah. Which
it's actually polar opposite. The more you eat, the more you can train harder, the more weight you're going to lose.
Yes, 100%. And like it's still a growing battle because even today, like obviously then like turning into working with like more powerlifters and that sort of thing as well. Like I still see the same issues. Like regardless, male or female. I know you were talking about beforehand that like females sometimes have it like a little bit like trickier. To be honest, like I think that males still have it quite tricky as well. It's just not talked about as openly.
I think it's different for a male because like the pressure that we get is that we're the provider. I think it's changing now.
Yeah.
But like in a relationship, we're the people that go to the work and we're expected to bring in the money and financially support the partner and the kid to buy a house. And like if we don't have that, we're looked on by society as like outcast. And that's something that I've struggled with my life because, like, you know, my parents were like, get a job, buy a house, have kids, and live the white picket fence. And I spoke about this in my episode. And that pressure on me was like throughout my whole 20s. And then I realized when I was 30, it's like, I don't want to own a house. I don't want to do that stuff. Like, I just want to do what I love and just enjoy life, like, and not have all that stuff. But I feel like, too, another thing that I had from a previous relationship was all the pressure that I had to be the provider. And I had to be, like, the person that should have all the money and I should pay for everything. And like, I feel like there's been a dynamic shift in society today where, like, women earn just as much money as fucking men. Like, and like, in certain things, like, I know girls that make way more money than me in business. Like,
especially when, like, you become your own boss. I think, like, still in some of, like, the old school hierarchies and stuff, there's obviously, like, the pay gaps, and it becomes a lot more tricky with women. Like, I mean, this is a whole topic in itself, but you can go into, like, the amount that people lose if they stop working to have kids and all these sorts of things as well. But no, and like, as you said, the guys definitely get those sort of pressures, but I also think that guys still get the pressure of, like, you know, like, a guy should be, like, big and strong sort of thing as well. Like, and if they are naturally more of that, like, ectomorph build, like, again, that puts heaps of pressure on them. You know, like, they're like, oh, we know, like, I can't gain weight. Like, I've seen so many guys that have struggled mentally because, like, they have a lot of anxiety and stuff, and they're like, I struggle, like, I want to have a bigger chest and I need to be bigger this way because otherwise I'm undesirable and all these sorts of things. So, like, it can sort of happen still both ways as well. But I also still see guys that are like, you know, they are still probably carrying more weight, but they struggle to lose weight as well, and they're still struggling with that body image, but they're also, again, probably under eating too much because of what their sort of sport is as well. Like, I'm working with someone now who I'm like, mate, like, I know they've lost weight in a very unsustainable way beforehand, but I'm like, looking at them now, I'm like, you're still not even eating the amount of calories that we need you to be eating now. And that's what's affecting a lot of your performance and your energy levels. And they know it, but they're so used to doing that dieting mindset. The very same that girls are as well. Yeah,
and I think, like, it's similar with guys, like, they think less you eat, the better. Like, and to give people a bit of an incentive about it, like, I cut, I think it was like 6 kilos last year, and I was eating 4,500 calories.
Yeah.
So, like, it's like, I just upped my expenditure and dropped down some calories, and boom, like, I dropped 6 kilos easy.
Yeah.
But like, for example, like, I bulk on like 5,000, but a lot of the time people just think, like, you know, 2,000, 3,000 calories for a guy is like normal cut. But if you're, like, over in the hundreds and 90 kilo weight class, you should be eating way more food.
100%. And, like, I think what you just said there, I even saw something on social media the other day, is that even for girls, like, people think that, like, girls should always be eating under 2,000 calories. And I'm like,
wow.
No.
D, for example, is losing weight on 2,500 calories. You know?
And again, like, another example of a situation where, like, originally was under eating, and not until we did up calories to make sure that she was supporting her energy expenditure and was supporting her training, did we end up seeing any sort of like fat loss sort of results as well. So yeah, it definitely comes sort of full circle and those sorts of things. But yeah, no, I just realized just how many people are stuck in the same sort of mindset patterns that I had been, and without that support, like, they're never going to be able to get out of it as well. And, like, it's a huge sort of change, and I feel so privileged now that I can sort of sit here and be like, hey, I have such a better, like, relationship with food. You know, like, I finally, you know, I got to the point where I was like, I can wear any kind of clothes that I want. I don't care. I wear crop tops and these sorts of things. But, like, I had to work really freaking hard to do that, because at the point even my partner would buy me, like, a nice, like, activewear set, and he was like, oh, why don't you wear it? And I was like, well, I don't feel comfortable in wearing that. And I remember I still have this, like, I saw it on my phone the other day, like a Snapchat photo that I sent, because I was like, you know, I went out and wore it, and I was like, guess who only felt uncomfortable 99% of the time while wearing this? But I was like, you don't change that unless you just get uncomfortable. Like, some of those things, it's in your mind, and it's part of that mindset that you need to work on to get through it.
Well, this relates to something in my life today as well. I posted a post last night, you might have seen, about, like, being in uncomfortable situations create growth and that. And it's like, I've been in a really uncomfortable situation for the last 12 weeks. Like, right, I hurt my abductor, got tendinopathy, I'm competing in Zero Pro soon, and I was like, I'm just going to pull out, I'm not going to do it. To Will last week, and he's like, let's just sit on it and let's just think about it. And I had a big think about it, and I'm like, am I pulling out because I'm scared that I'm not going to put up a bigger total and then I'm not going to be who I expect to be, or am I just, like, trying to take the easy road? And I try to figure out my own mind, and then I realized that, like, I was getting in an uncomfortable place and I was trying to pull myself out of it. And instead of pushing myself forward into it, and then I realized and I was like, fuck this, let's just do it. So let's just go, what could go wrong? Like at the end of the day, I'll go wrong and I'll learn things that like I can use then for coaching and also use for my own training, or it could go good and everything should come right and I'll have a fucking perfect meet.
Yeah.
So like I'm forcing myself to be in that uncomfortable situation so it doesn't become it becomes comfortable.
Exactly. If it's a mindset block, like, yeah, it's one of those things. It's never just going to be comfortable. You have to slowly sort of edge yourself, and you're never going to grow and be able to expand your mindset in that way unless you get a little bit uncomfortable.
But I think like if you continue to block those things with your mind, you don't allow yourself to see yourself going into those situations.
Yeah.
I'm lucky that I've got a lot of people around me that'd be like, hey, like D, for example, would be like, hey, nah, you'll be right. You'll get there. And then, so like her thoughts come into me and then Will says things and I'm like, am I just playing my own head?
Yeah.
Like, so if you don't have the right people around you, you just kind of you got to try and catch yourself like thinking like that.
Oh, 100%. And I think that's like a good point because like I think about how long it took me to make those realizations and to change that. And like it was like 15 years. If I go back from like when I started having issues with food till, as I say, like basically like only a couple of years ago, it took me that long. Yet like when I often work with clients, like it still takes a long time, but I start to see them having these sorts of revelations in like a couple of months.
Yeah.
Like they made so much more progress because they are in that supportive environment and they've got that accountability and that they've got that support there. Something that I never had, like I probably could have got, but I never sort of even knew that I needed at this stage.
And that's why I tried to build like in River City, like our support network where everyone kind of backs off each other because, you know, like all it takes is a couple of people to give you some like positive advice and it can shift your mind in a completely different direction.
Yeah, 100%.
So like being surrounded by people a lot and your environment that you're in can change who you are very dramatically. And I can talk about that from my experience because like 2 people came into my life and shifted me in a direction completely south of wherever I was always, where I was going. So, yeah. So where does this leave you now? Like
now?
Yeah, like so what's next for Zoe? Like what?
What's next for me? Well, I mean, not a whole lot. I mean, like I'm very fortunate now being in a space where I'm like working for myself, all these sorts of things. And, you know, at the moment, like probably like the biggest next thing is that like I'm getting married in a few months. So that's apparently meant to be exciting.
I feel sorry for you marrying Brandon.
He's a good egg. Look, we're both a bit like quirky. So I think we just
spectrum things. I keep calling everyone that's around me on the spectrum because one of my friends said to me not long ago that people on the spectrum attract people on the spectrum. So I'm just like, you're all on the spectrum now because like apparently I attract people that are on the spectrum. So,
but no, at this stage it's like kind of like hustling through, continuing. Like my biggest sort of passion is to continue to support this message of the fact of like, you know, you can want to lose weight and you can want to sort of change your habits, but how you're doing that is actually really important. And if you are going down a trajectory where it's only making yourself feel worse, like your energy's feeling worse, you're feeling worse about yourself and your body image, like it's not worth it. Like I've done that whole sort of thing. So many other people have done it. Like majority of people in their life have done it before, and we know that it doesn't leave anywhere positive. So like, you know, there are ways that we can still manipulate our body composition. We can get stronger. We can lose body fat, gain muscle, all these sorts of things, but we can do it in a smarter and a balanced way where it doesn't take away from our mental and our physical capacities again. Like it's not necessary to do that to be able to feel good.
Yeah, and I think it's cool because like I think that like the method you've built based off your experience is great because it allows you to express to the world what you think is right. And it's like it's something that I've been really doing lately is trying to push my method out there to show people what I have from my experience. And like one of those things that I've been speaking to about a lot was like high rep ranges and saying that you don't need to do them. There's better and smarter ways to train. And a lot of people will disagree with me, but it's the same thing for you. Off your experience of like growing up and the things you went through, you can now share the methodology that you've built based off your experiences to help other people so they don't go through what you've been through.
Yeah, and exactly. And as you say, like people need different things. There's not one perfect approach across the board for everyone. And that's why it's okay to have different methods of doing things. Some people really enjoy strict dieting and they can do it because they don't have the poor relationships with food. So it doesn't affect them mentally. Go for it. Do it. But for the people that do struggle with it more, know that that's not the only option. And as you say, in terms of training, it's like there's different ways that you can train that may be more beneficial for some people and not for other people. Like you're here to present your sort of way of doing things that's going to attract those people that it does help. And that's what it is. If everyone was the same, then life would be boring.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, Matt's a person that strict diets, like down the T to the T. Shout out Matt Holt.
Love it.
Easiest customer ever. But yeah, I think that's where we'll finish up. Thanks for everyone listening in. But if you'll be hearing Zoe once a month on here, if we can make sure we can get one on, just about different topics. If you have any topics that you would like Zoe to talk about, just send us a message, or I'll put up a questionnaire eventually anyway, and we can do it there.
100%.
So, thanks, guys. Thank you for listening in to the Rivercity Unlimited podcast. To hear future episodes, please subscribe to our podcast, and we would really appreciate it if you shared the podcast on your social media story and tagged Rivercity Barbell. If you could also head over and give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcast and Spotify, that would be really appreciated. For all coaching inquiries, please go to the link in our show notes or head over to our social media at rivercitybarbell.aus on Instagram or Rivercity Barbell on Facebook. Thanks for tuning into the episodes, and I hope you enjoy future episodes.